Hi, and welcome back to another installment of our Principal Mouthpiece comparison videos. We are once again in Pickman Hall at the Longy School of Music, just finishing up a 10-day summer intensive camp in contemporary music called Divergent at Longy Studios. We bring together a bunch of composers and performers. This year, I think we have almost 40 composers and a little over 20 performers. And we do all sorts of fun chamber music together with a contemporary focus. Um, so it's a lot of fun playing in a lot of different ensembles, a lot of coaching, a lot of teaching. It's a really lovely time. And while I'm here, I really like to use this hall to kind of feel where my orchestral sound is at, as opposed to, practicing in an apartment or a small, like, practice studio somewhere. So today we're going to look at some of the softer, more lyrical Germanic repertoire in Brahms 4, the famous chorale to it, and then the little 8-bar phrase that's after it. Um, so far we've done Bolero for kind of the high-end singing sound, Saint-Saëns 3 for kind of the low lyrical sound, to Eulenspiegel for like articulations and kind of like really punchy music. And it'll be nice to approach the medium high range, and really I'm going to do my best to focus on really playing the dynamics as quietly as possible to see what the mouthpieces do and how they make a difference, and focusing on the length and release of the notes. So I'm going to be definitely trying to keep the dynamics maybe a touch softer than I would in an audition for security, but to really see what this lineup of principal trombone mouthpieces is capable of. We're going to start off today with the Greg Black Kitzman model, which is a 5GL with a .277 shank. I love playing this mouthpiece because it always gives me the feeling that like I'm part of an old recording from like a famous like a Chicago Symphony section, or a famous like Los Angeles Philharmonic, or Cleveland or New York or Philadelphia, one of those, one of those orchestras. It kind of has that really nice, sweet, compact tenor trombone classic sound. So next up we have this super interesting design from LI Brass. I love that this company is like a really pushing boundaries of what mouthpieces should look like, and both in the aesthetics and the shape. It's just every time I play this mouthpiece, I just think, wow, that mouthpiece looks really amazing and seems super cool. This is a first generation Sasha Romero mouthpiece, and with a .285 shank on it. this mouthpiece, as opposed to any of the other ones in there, it has by far the most rounded rim. So it feels very comfortable, but also, I guess I kind of like a little bit of sharpness on my rim to help guide the chops into the right place. I would have to spend some time in this to really get the articulations to where I feel more comfortable or used to them, compared to most of the other lineup, which feels a little bit more traditionally rimmed rather than as like slopey feeling as this. But the sound's really gorgeous. Next we have the Ian Bousfield S mouthpiece, which has a more tapered shape to it and has a very compact and brilliant sound I've found in past excerpts. Let's see if that this Germanic repertoire, what happens with that kind of more like strong sound. If we can kind of loosen it up a little bit and just warm it up. Well, let's find out. Really fun to play this. It feels like driving a really fast car feels sometimes, like when it wants you to really push down on the gas pedal and kind of go. And it just gets that feeling like as you start to play it, it almost like brings you into the mouthpiece, and it like almost like makes you articulate the note, even when you're just trying to like into the sound. It really wants that like that minimum like go to it. It's really neat. Next up we have a Hammond custom design mouthpiece made for Steve Witser. Hammonds are usually have a large field of them, have a really interesting like kind of this shank. It definitely does something to the sound because the cup ends up looking a lot like some of the more like Greg Black. It looks like a cross between almost the LA Brass and a Greg Black mouthpiece, but I really feel like this shank adds something unique to the Hammond sound. Steve Witser played principal for many years as an acting principal with the Cleveland Orchestra, and he also played principal at the LA Philharmonic. And he just had this really beautiful, sweet, floating sound, and from what I remember hearing. Although he's capable of plenty of power when he wanted to as well. Let's see how this feels. another mouthpiece that plays with a very, very classic kind of American orchestral sound. It's really complex though, too. There's something to this mouthpiece that makes it feel different than the traditional like Bach 5G design. Different set of overtones. It's just, it has a really, for lack of a better term, to my ears, the prettiness to it. Also, I forgot to turn off my screensaver, so I had to quickly adapt to that in a second. Next up, we're going to look at the Greigo-Alessi 7F mouthpiece. This has the smallest rim, but the deepest cup of this Alessi line. So what I feel like when I play Alessi style mouthpieces, as the back half of this lineup will be, is that they really encourage length and release throughout the sound. I think the mass and the cup of them really add something to the character. Although the articulations at first always feel like you have to be extra secure in your note generation. But then once you get to that note, you feel pretty cared for. This next is going to be a Greg Black mouthpiece custom made for Carl Mazzio, and it's within the Alessi school of design, so it's very similar. Very heavy mouthpiece, very wide rim. This is probably like a 3G rim or so, but it's a little shallower than most of the Alessi mouthpieces are. Although that the overall depth is shallow, it has kind of a squarish feel to the cup, if that makes sense. Like it feels more like a cylinder than a square, I should say. It feels like it goes straight down and then tapers at the very, very, very last second. So although it's a little shallow, it feels like it plays a little bigger because of that design aspect. I've been thinking a lot about how in the orchestral world you have to play with more of a reflexive downbeat. You're always kind of following the conductor up here to the downbeat. This mouthpiece feels like it fits that style the most naturally. Like I start my articulation and the sound wants to be gently behind it, more brushed in. It's also, I find it to be the most tonally consistent mouthpiece. I feel like there was the smallest amount of difference between the forte and the original pianissimo in terms of the tone color that I'm hearing with it. Next up, we have Joe Alessi's new Laskey 60 Symphonic line. Again, it's a little lighter than his contemporaneous mouthpieces with Greg Black or Greigo in my experience. But it does have that like classic Alessi design. Fairly deep mouthpiece. He usually plays on a 67 mouthpiece. I like the 60. You'll see what a 67 mouthpiece sounds like next on this same repertoire. With this mouthpiece, I was most aware of the overtones in the sound as I was going through from note to note. It's the first time I felt like with any of the mouthpieces that I was really hearing the higher overtones and really trying to keep them really steady as I played through it. I don't know how much of the cell phone microphone will pick that up, but it was a very interesting feel to it. And lastly, we have the Greigo-Alessi 1D, the widest mouthpiece and a fairly deep cup. I tend to like deep cup mouthpieces. This is in that 26.7 millimeter mouthpiece that's significantly larger than everything else we're playing today. So it's going to be kind of an adventure to play this on a mouthpiece that's like normally pretty big compared to what I usually use. So when I start notes on this mouthpiece, there's always that moment of, my intention's there and I'm gonna want this note to come out. And there's just a little bit of a delay where you wait for the proof to happen. But interestingly, holding the note steady felt really good on this mouthpiece. There's just something about the way that the lips sat inside it that felt very comforting once the note itself was engaged. And with these last two mouthpieces, could be because of the bigger rim sizes, they're the only mouthpieces that I could feel the horn kind of like vibrating in my hands from time to time, which is a nice resonation that feels good from time to time. And I will say that although this is the largest rim mouthpiece, I have a hard time deciding if the Sasha Romero mouthpiece or the Alessi Greigo 1D mouthpiece feels bigger, which is a very interesting thing to compare. Even though that the specs on this are closer to 25.5, I believe, and the specs on this are like 26.7. I might be misremembering a little bit off the top of my head. They actually end up feeling the same, again, because of that more sloped rim on the Li brass mouthpiece. All right, so that's the lineup. That's Brahms 4. And thank you for listening. I'm always happy to enjoy this hall, and I'm always thankful for anybody who pays attention. Thank you.